A very good afternoon to all our dear participants. Hi Ram, Srishti, Shyam, Ushma, Bhavik, Hilag, Himanshu, Tushar. Thank you all for joining in. So we'll begin in a minute's time. Well, it's time to begin with another exciting session on connecting the dots. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Employee expectations are ratcheting up against HR as comparisons are made to frictionless customer experience outside the office. The organization too has new expectations on HR demands like help me to build an agile organization or give me actionable insights to make better people decisions are becoming increasingly common. How can HR help the organization, its employees, and themselves? Join us for this very captivating session where our industry experts, who are also happen to be good friends, will be sharing their experience and views on how can design thinking help HR professionals. HRAI welcomes you all to the session on connecting the dots, HR Unplugged, Design Thinking in HR. To know more about HRAI and its event, I would request all our participants to visit the link and details posted in the chat window. It would be great to have all the participants' feedback. We will be running a poll before the Q&A session. Request all participants to kindly give your feedback on this session. I now take the privilege to introduce our esteemed panel members for our today's webinar. Ms. Devchani Roy, Chief Human Resource Officer, Mind Your Fleet, Chromosome Softwares Private Limited, an HR domain expert with 25 plus years of industry experience across segments like manufacturing, telecom, IT, ITES, travel, hospitality, and healthcare. A pass out from FMS Delhi and a passionate HR practitioner by choice have been facilitated for transformational as well as curated HR work in organizations of repute by national and international agencies throughout the career span. Currently, the CHRO of a startup in the IT space also offer independent HR consulting to organizations on project basis. Also is an adjunct faculty to many B schools, a prolific speaker across events and an author too. You can also follow her on LinkedIn. The link for the same has been shared in the chat window. Thank you, ma'am, for accepting our invite. Our next panel member, Ms. Harini Srinivasan, partner, Simco Style Institute, India. Ms. Harini comes with an immense experience of 24 years of successful experiments in the area of leveraging people potential for business excellence in an HR leader. She is a behavioral scientist, design thinker, storyteller, passionate about unlocking human potentials to derive business outcomes, experienced in multi-geographical and multi-industry in driving business transformation. Harini comes with a master's degree in medicinal chemistry from Mumbai University and a master's in business administration, human resource from ICFAI. A strong believer in driving one's density, in a strong believer in driving one's destiny. She practices resilience as a life skill. Positivity and ability to drive engagement with people helps her be an influencer both to industry and academia. You can also follow her on LinkedIn. The link for the same has been shared in the chat window. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us for our today's session. Our next panel member, Mr. Sahil Nair, Senior Associate Director, KPMG, an experienced HR professional whose forte is building an employer brand that helps attract and leverage relevant talent. Mondays through Fridays are about driving the entire employee life cycle with exposure to the finer nuance of human resource and its functioning in a growing and evolving organization. He is also a visiting faculty at business schools like IIM and IIT. He is also a core committee member of the Mumbai chapter at NHRD. You can also follow him on LinkedIn. Details for the same have been mentioned in the chat window. Thank you, sir, for joining us for today's session. Now I'll introduce our panel come moderator for today's session, Mr. Jonathan D'Souza, Group Head, COE, Talent Rewards, NHRIS, Wellspun Group. Jonathan is a passionate business leader focused on people at the core of everything he does. With more than 17 years of experience, Jonathan has spent the last 10 years in leadership positions with his career in corporate as well as HR consulting, partnering with leading organizations operating in various sectors ranging from startups to large enterprises, working closely with boards, entrepreneurs, family offices, and seasoned professionals. He has led cross-functional teams in enabling technology enhancement, sales analytics, and corporate strategies. Recognized as a top 40 under 40 HR leaders by Chombe in 2019, he currently is with Wellspun Group based out of Mumbai. An alumnus of Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, he loves discussing psychology, behavioral economics, and equity investing. You can also follow him on LinkedIn. Details for the same are mentioned in the chat window. Without taking much time, I will hand over the session to Mr. Jonathan. Over to you, Mr. Jonathan.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. And I could see that, when you have to introduce such an astute panel, we are bound to have some gulps. So, I am very nervous. The good part is that these are all my friends. So, the way generally for all of the audience thank you for joining us. And generally when you moderate a panel, you generally plug in questions, you generally do a mock run and all that. Let me tell the audience today that we've decided not to do any of that, and this is completely unplugged, unstructured. If you were born in the era where I was born, there was something called MTV Unplugged. So it's completely impromptu. And I will be shooting questions to people, depending on whether I see them focusing, not focusing, and also cross-questioning them on certain things. I hope they don't ask me any questions, but here we go. So I would also like to thank everyone who's written in with their questions. So I will definitely pick up a few of those. And clearly, we'll try to get in all the different moods as the panelists start answering these questions from their experience, expertise, and the context which they bring. So first up, let's start with the basics. For someone like me who, doesn't even think, forget design thinking. Sahil, Debjani, would you want to, starting with Debjani, Sahil, and then to Harini, who definitely, I know, practices a lot of design thinking. So Debjani, for a layman, in a layman language, and most HR professionals in this group today, when you hear about design thinking, how do you explain it to a layman? I mean, what comes to your mind first thing when you talk about design thinking? And Sahil, same question to you once she's done. Remember, we cannot, before the third panelist answers, there's no all of the above is not allowed.
That's a good clarification, good disclaimer, right? Okay, Jonathan, thanks. Happy to, kick off this discussion. And as you rightly said, this is actually going to be completely unplugged. So for the rest of the participants, if there are some guffaws or some inadvertent mistakes or something that we just, commit in the course of the discussion, please bear with us. We've come here completely unprepared and completely from the soul, from the heart. So, layman way of looking at design thinking, I think the best way to look at it is, see, we all have a right brain and a left brain, right? I mean, one part of the brain, of course, helps us to look at things in a very cognitive, in a very structured, in a very rational and logical manner, which is, I think, everybody on this panel and everybody in the audience would be aware of. The other part of the brain, which is what we call the lateral brain, is basically something which is all related to the creativity part of us. And every human individual does have a creative streak internally. I mean, it could be a latent factor. It could be something which is not been brought out in the often, but everybody does have it. It comes out more out of practice and more out of, giving vent to different kinds of thinking. So I think, when you look at any issue in front of you, and I'm speaking completely from a layman perspective, so any situation, any issue, any problem, call it by any other adjective, if you have that in front of you, and instead of looking at it in a very programmed manner or in a very linear way, which is only one way of looking at it, which is what I mean by the linear way, if you do give vent to certain imaginative thinking and you try and break down that issue or a problem into things which is more empathetic, which is more in terms of putting yourself in the shoes of the other person to experience how it could be an experience for yourself at the same time, and how would you want it to be different, or could it be different? If you were to ideate and brainstorm around these questions, which automatically leads to certain amount of imaginative and creative thinking, then you could possibly look at that problem from a different perspective, from just being a very linear problem. And when you do look at it from a different perspective, what is given rise to is a little bit of a different solution. A solution may be a way of even looking at it, or even a way of executing it. And when you do give vent to that, perhaps what comes out of it is an experience which is a better, a more customized, and a more, what do I say, a more caring sort of a solution for the human being, whether it is the employee in an organization, whether it is a colleague, whether it is a peer. It could be that much more a customized solution for that person. So I would say that for a layman, looking at a problem from a different angle, not supposedly going by the stated line alone, and then following up on certain amount of creative and imaginative thinking to give rise to solution which you otherwise may not have looked at, and therefore giving rise to certain solutions that way, would probably be what is design thinking all about.
Sahil?
Hey, John. So first of all, thank you so much for having me over HRAI. And John, I think you got the order wrong. You should have started with Harini first, because when Dave goes first, I think so there's nothing really left. She's covered almost everything, but let me try and put it slightly differently. To my mind, design thinking is, in a very simple, I love the way you asked the question about the layman, right? So if I had to explain this to a 5-year-old child, I would typically put that 5-year-old child in the center of the conversation. And I would ask that 5-year-old kid, do you want to have an exploratory conversation? Again, I'm using jargon here, but would you want to explore? And the whole process of exploring, to my mind, is design thinking. Some of the key principles of design thinking, to dumbify it, to simplify it, is keeping the user in the center. So if it's a 5-year-old kid, and if I want to design an innovative way to unwrap a chocolate for a 5-year-old kid, I'm going to ask that kid, what will make you happy? You bought a chocolate, but now you want to have it. So while you unwrap it, what's going to give you joy? What's going to give you happiness? What's going to get you ecstatic? What's going to give you that surprise element to say, oh, will this turn out with a cookie inside? With a candy inside? Will it be a different flavor? Will it be something that will be very unique? And therefore, what I'm essentially doing is I'm exploring the entire process with the user in the center, number one. Number two, I'm not only looking at it from a product perspective, but I'm also marrying it with a service and an experience. So like Devjani beautifully said, it could be an employee, it could be a product. But I'm also bringing a culmination of both the aspects to say, yes, I have bought a product, which is a chocolate. But at the same time, the entire experience of unraveling it, say a bonbonne, right? How am I really calling it? You need to earn a bonbonne, right? And therefore, the positioning to say you need to earn it. And once you earn it, you need to enjoy having it. It's not just opening it up and popping it into your mouth and saying, okay, I've had M&M, or I've had a lovely after eight, or I've had a very, very nice nutty body feel, right? So how do you really unravel the whole wrapper to make the whole experience of having that chocolate mouth-watering? And therefore, a combination of product, service, and experience. And most importantly, I think something that we all miss out many times when we talk about design thinking is the core team that explores the problem statement for a product, service, or an experience should never shoot down ideas. Because the moment you start shooting down ideas in the brainstorming process, you never realize what you're really killing. Because every user in today's world, in a hyper-personalized world, will have a very, very different expectation from a particular service, product, or experience. And therefore, when your core team of users, customers, clients are coming together with subject matter experts to solve for a particular problem, let the entire brainstorming process happen without shooting down ideas. And as you get into prototyping, which is one of the steps in design thinking that we'll talk about, how do you really decide what works, what doesn't, what is viable, what is not? I have 3-4 more points, but I don't want to steal Harini's thunder because then your clause of saying all of the above can't be covered will get vanished. But over to you, Harini.
Okay. So after Devjani speaks like an encyclopedia with everything possible in an accurate and precise manner, and after Sahil speaks like a picture book, what is left with me is just the possibility of a comic strip. So I'll become a 3-frame Dilbert comic, and I'll say, for me, if I have to explain what design thinking is to a lay person, what I would say is, you come to me with a problem statement, or someone comes to you with a problem statement. The approach you take to address that problem statement is, you look at it and you start saying, I don't know, tell me more. So design thinking is all about putting yourself in a situation as if you do not know the solution to the problem, to an extent that you do not even know whether the problem is defined properly, taking a step back and saying, I don't know, tell me more. And the I don't know, tell me more iterative process goes on, covering all the steps in design thinking that we will talk about later, right till the end when it is delivered as a solution to the problem. So I don't know, tell me more is my one-line answer here.
If I may very quickly just rebut in there, I think so, it's extremely important. While I like that catchy phrase of I don't know, tell me more, as HR professionals, we need to use it very sparingly, because the other side of the world is going to say, of course you don't know. And if you don't know, what are you going to do? But I think the mindset of saying, I don't know, I want to know more, is the whole aspect that Harini is talking about, is being curious. Because if you start off with the solution in mind, you're not going to be able to apply design thinking. But if you start off with saying, I don't know, I'm curious, of course, you will explore a lot more than otherwise you may just shut out through the process. But many times these words can be misunderstood.
Yes, thanks for highlighting the difference between ignorance and curiosity. Yeah, be mindful of that. Yes.
Oh, and I just, not that I want to have the last line, but it's so very important, that point which Sahil brought to the book. HR is probably the only function, and HR professionals are perhaps the only intuitive group of people who can actually yet say that I don't know enough, and wear the cloak of being subject matter experts at the table at the same time. Because they can play this tightrope balancing very well. Why I say this is because one comes across a lot of starched coats. And when I say starched coats, I mean a group of people who are so full of vanity, and they feel that they know the subject so well that they, exactly what Harini said, they kill the issue before even it takes off. So it's very important that while you carry that knowledge with you, you don't come across as busybodies and starched coats who are killing an issue even before it gets to be on the table. So I think that's a beauty which HR professionals do manage to balance out very well.
Great. I think I didn't have to ask the next question, and I could get Sally and Devjani coming in back, and that's so nice to hear that it's all about keeping the user. So what I picked up is keeping the user at the center, and continue trying to find out what is the kind of experience you want to give the user at the end of the day. Rather than a run of the mill. In the normal HR practice, which I've grown up with, it says that there's a process and the policy. Whatever doesn't fit in the process policy, सीधा ना बोल दे यार, बात खत्म हो गई, दिमाग नहीं लगाना है, right? Now here is a very different approach. So which gets me to my next question, is that one of our favorite topics in HR has been the generations at the workplace. That in itself is a huge research area. And now, if I combine design thinking to generations at the workplace, is there a way where these both aspects can go hand in hand? For example, to simplify the question, do I need to do multiple types of design thinking for multiple types of generation, or does it one size fit all? Harini, why don't we start with you?
First of all, design thinking can never be called one size fits all. That's where it comes from. So it's a way of thinking. So whether you have multiple generations in a workplace or whether you have one generation, it's all about different people. So every individual has a way of thinking. Every individual has a choice. Every individual has a preference. Every individual has a different expectation from a product or a service. So when you apply design thinking to a problem statement, or I would still want to call it a need statement, not a problem statement here. When you apply design thinking, obviously the whole concept starts with understanding the different personas, putting yourself as a design thinker into each one's shoes and looking at the need statement from their perspective. So in my viewpoint, it is absolutely agnostic of whether it is multi-generational or any kind of a diversity. It really doesn't matter. As long as your if the need statement that you want to take to the people is something that has to address the needs of a diverse group of audience, it's very important that you take a sample so that you're able to put the appropriate persona and arrive at what is it that each one expects. So it's definitely not one size fits all. That's something which is totally contrasting to how a design thinker would work.
Sahil, Debjani, anyone of you want to add?
Sure. I think, Jonathan, the way you look at this is very similar to what a marketeer would look at, right? And typically we go back to Michael Porter's 4 Ps. And if you really look at it from that perspective, and if I look at the whole process of segmentation, right? I think we call it personas, we call it cohorts, we call it whatever name you want to call it. But effectively what you're really doing is you're looking at, through your empathy discussions, through your various groups of people that you interact with based on various segmentations that you would do, you will arrive at a common basis point. And that common basis point will help you arrive at a starting point to be more curious. It works as a baseline. And I think that baseline identification is very important, because otherwise, to contextualize your question, if I have an organization of 1 lakh employees, am I going to have 1 lakh policies? The answer is no.
No.
Right? It's not going to be viable at all. Can I keep customizing every policy? I'll be writing manuals for years. So the bottom line is, how do you really identify to say yes? And if you want to pick up generations as an example, to say every 5 or 10 years, I believe my workforce is significantly changing. And basis this change, these are the top needs of this workforce from this generation. And therefore, if I look at compensation as an example, can I offer a bouquet of services, a bouquet of options that people may choose? A certain generation may have a bias towards NPS, right? A certain generation may say, why don't you give me ESOPs? Yeah. A certain generation may come back and say, listen, all this is fine, but I may work for a partnership firm. Can you make me an equity partner? Because I have the drive where I can actually go out and get massive revenue, but I want a profit share. I don't want to work as an employee, although I may be just 2 years in your organization. So I'm saying, is corporate India, is India Inc. able to understand these various needs based on various demographics and offer that as options through the process of design?
Lovely. And how beautifully said. And of course, he took away that light of market segmentation from me. And just like we said, we're going unplugged this time. We'll be put on crossfoot every time this happens. But the only thing I want to say is, look at the world we are operating in today. I mean, we have people who bring in years of rich experience to the table. And we can't wish that away, because every organization needs that kind of a think tank, that kinds of superior thinking to be brought in. At the same time, we've walked into the era of the digital nomads. Okay, we're not only talking of gig economy, we're talking of digital nomads who are walking into your offices, bargaining for the best projects at the best price that you quote. And after that, they're happy to go and start working at the base camp to climb Mount Everest. Now, if that is not a digital nomad, who is, and to be able to customize a solution to somebody like that, in contrast to a thought leadership body who are the yesteryear's CXO groups, the old boys club as we call it, is going to be as different as chalk and cheese. Now, if HR is not agile enough today to be able to look at problems from probably, it's the same goddess Durga with 10 hands. I mean, we have to have 10 pair of eyes. We have to really look at them from different angles, and to be able to cuff up solutions that can cater to the digital guy, to the today's generation and possibly a bit of tomorrow's, as well as the one who's adding to the thinking pattern and the board leadership of the organization, then we're going to be degenerating not only as a function, but we're not going to be able to give insights to the top leadership to be able to take better people decisions. So I think that's where your design thinking emerges as one of the most critical areas, of organization building today. Not so much infrastructure, not so much monetary concerns, but the ability to be able to look at things differently, customize solutions, and to be able to execute them well. And we need to do that as a fraternity. We have to keep innovating. We have to bring that creativity to the fore, and that's what's going to lend that edge to us as a function.
So Devjani, I think so while you've very rightly been very critical of our function, which is good because it keeps raising the bar higher and higher, and you said HR needs to be agile, I have a slight disconnect there. And sorry, I'm going to be slightly provocative. I think while HR definitely needs to be agile, and I'm completely in agreement with you, I think organizations also need to be ready.
Yeah.
What we have many times seen is fantastic HR leaders who do very well, who think ahead of time, but maybe the organization is not that mature and not ready to really accept that kind of change. And therefore, as you rightly said, HR professionals need to pace it reasonably so that it's not ahead of its time and therefore lead to unnecessary issues. Because when the organization is not ready, even though the plan may be fantastic, it might not really take off.
I completely agree with you, Sahil. There's no taking anything away from that point. And I think each one of us in our own career span would have come across instances like that. Because, when you think ahead, maybe 2 steps or 3 steps from where the organization is, that pace dysfunctionality in itself brings the leverage down from where the organization needs to be. So that there's absolutely no disconnect there. I was just trying to highlight the design thinking and the HR part of it, but organizations definitely need to be at a level of maturity to be able to take that forward. No two ways about it.
Very, 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 very good, Jugalbandi happening. And I'm, glad that this is not a panel which is acknowledging everything and saying, okay, ye bhi ho sakta hai, but also differing on views. And I think that's what makes this discussion much more meatier. And before I go on to, level 2 of the discussion, my last question for this session right now for all 3 of you all is that, do you have something very close to your heart when you observe design thinking which touched you as an individual, where, it could be in HR, in your careers, or as a consumer, which you would like to, highlight to our audience today, which touched your heart and made you think that, oh, look, this is so well thought and there's been a design principle used in this. So why don't we start with you, Sahil?
Okay, thanks. I think so 2 examples that come to my mind. One is a little bit of work that I've done in the HR space, which I'll talk about later. But the first one that really comes to mind, which is doing the rounds on WhatsApp, and each one of us, I'm sure, have really seen that, is the Cadbury ad. I think brilliant, right? It is something that really touched your heart, not just because it was about a situation where technology, people, and an organization, Mondelez, is really known about its entire space in the sweets and confectionery and Diwali, but more so about bringing the whole current situation of the pandemic in the center of it all, to say small retailers, people need help, they are restarting, why don't you support them? And I think so today, we used to discuss this on various HR conferences almost a decade ago when I was a participant, and I would attend a lot of them, more so as a participant and less as a speaker, where people spoke about person-driven organizations moving to purpose-driven organizations. And we heard a lot about it, we debated a lot about it, but today, at least I am seeing a lot of organizations being purpose-led. And this Mondelez example was a classic case of saying, listen, eventually you will go and buy Cadbury's, but buy Cadbury's through people who need help, because you're going to be supporting them as you buy our product. That was one brilliant example to my mind of saying, how do you go online? For those of you who've not really seen the ad, please do go and watch it. It actually tells you about how they've done a complete listing of all the small retailers in your vicinity, basis GPS tracking on your PIN code. And the moment you see the ad, wherever you are, basis your GPS, the ad gives you stores in the vicinity, right? So if Jonathan is sitting in Kola, he'll see stuff there. Harani is in Thane, Devjani is in Gurgaon. Different parts of the country, they will see ads of Kirana Walas in respective vicinities. That was one example. The second one was from Facebook. We all have seen that, right? The milk one, where she gives jobs to people. Now look at that, like classic. The brother is saying, "Gaadi kyun bech rahe ho? Hamare paas itna kaam nahi hai. Dukaan choti padegi." All of that, right? Literally gave us goosebumps, tears to our eyes. And on one hand, when you see Mark Zuckerberg sitting in the Senate giving answers to very uncomfortable questions, and on the other hand, you see an ad like this, you sit back and reflect, who is the user? Is the user someone who's creating content? Or is the user you and me, who's really sharing our daily lives on Facebook? And I think these two approaches of putting the user in the center, of giving examples of great amount of empathy to say, listen, मैं तो अपना धंधा करूंगा ही, मैं तो मिठाई बेचूंगा ही, मगर आप उससे खरीदो जिससे फायदा हो, जिससे उनको फायदा हो, right? Another example of putting the larger people who've lost their jobs in the pandemic at center stage and saying, if I can support 3 or 4 more families, why not do so? And if you look at the Facebook ad, it's a lot about common sense, Jonathan. What is she doing? She's picking up and supporting people who've lost their jobs. And those same people who came and applied to that place because of the Facebook ad or the post, today had done a post for her. And that's gone viral, right? So just think about the whole karmic cycle. And sorry, I'm being slightly philosophical about it, but just think about what goodness goes around, comes around. And therefore, how do we pick up some lessons from this? And whether we learn the principles of design thinking or not, to my mind, it honestly doesn't matter. But at the end of this 1-hour discussion with so many wonderful people on this platform, and each of my co-panelists and you, I think if we can leave everybody with one message to say, from this session, what's that one thing you're going to do for that one person in your life who matters to you the most? Forget anything else. Forget design thinking. Forget applying it to HR. वो सब हम करते रहेंगे. बहुत सारे master class होंगे. We'll all learn all of that. That's absolutely fine. Harini does that as part of her consulting. Devjani does it. Jonathan, you're a great speaker. There'll be 1,000 speakers to talk about design thinking and principles. I'm saying, can we pick up the one most important person in our life, make that person the user, and commit to ourselves that we've attended and spent 1 hour of our time on this wonderful day today? Can we pick up the principles and make that one person the center of our life and make that person happy? And I think if we can do that, we will leave this session as slightly better human beings than what we were when we joined the session. Don't want to steal the thunder, but back to you, Jonathan.
Sure. I think Sahil, that's a really good thought. I mean, at the end of the day, even when Devjani started this session saying that, it's unprepped, it's completely unplugged, what have we done? We brought your souls into this meeting, and because it's not prepped up, you're now thinking from here, from the heart. I think that's already touching people, because I can see a lot of comments coming on the group as well. Harini, Sahil has, obviously spoke of what touched him, but I know that you do a lot of classes on design thinking, but there's something which may have catalyzed you to start this, right?
Yes.
So what is closest to you when it comes to design thinking?
Exactly. I'm so glad you brought what triggered me to actually practice design thinking and bring it out to the world. Is while Sahil spoke about 2 very well-known stories which have gone viral, I want to bring to this audience 2 very, very unknown stories. One of it is slightly known, the other one is absolutely unknown. It is something that I discovered. And unfortunately, that was a time when I didn't have a camera, phone, and all that, and I could not capture that moment. But that was something which actually triggered what design thinking could be, and it came from an absolutely unexpected corner. Down south, I was touring with my family, an extended family, in a village, where literacy level was quite low. This is one of those remote villages where literacy level is quite low. And there was this milk vendor. She used to deliver milk at homes at 3:30 a.m. Because she had to do a lot of other jobs to take care of herself and her family. So her milk delivery time was at an unearthly hour at 3:30 a.m. And she used to deliver the milk sachets, the packets, okay? And she had this challenge. People used to complain that she delivers the wrong kind of milk and the wrong quantity of milk every time. So she went through this complaint several times, and there was no way that she could find a solution, because even if somebody wrote, 1.5 liters of low-fat milk, she wouldn't be able to read it. So what she did, so she gave them an idea, and she said, outside your door, pin up the packets, the empty packets of the kind of milk and the quantity that you want. And I will actually put a refill, which is exactly that. So if you want 1.5 liters of full fat milk, pin up 1 liter packet and a half a liter packet of full fat milk. I will see that packet and I'll understand what you want and I'll deliver. She actually ended up doing zero error result. So this is where she put her user in the center of everything, and all that she wanted to come up with a solution is not that something that's going to she didn't think of something which is really very complicated and sophisticated. All that she wanted is communication should be very clear and her customer is king, and she came up with this solution. Hats off to that woman who brought this up, and that was something where I thought what it really means to put customer at center stage. The second example which really touched my heart was at the start of the lockdown. There is this farmer couple, very, 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 very poverty-stricken place in Bidar. They were locked down at home, absolutely not knowing what to do. But the only thing they knew is there were several representations from their village to the government asking for support during water shortages, acute water shortages, because that was a village which was heading towards a lot of suicides by farmers. And they got no respite. So this couple, what they did is every day they decided to dig 2 meters down the ground. They consistently did that till they struck water. So the way they spent their lockdown days was not thinking about what they do for themselves, but they put each one of them as a representative of the village and tried to find a solution for the problem that is for the village. So these were two things which are not very popular stories. The first one definitely is not there anywhere on social media. That's something that I saw. Would love to write about it sometime, and I don't know how to trace that woman, that milk vendor. The second one did come a little bit on social media, but these are two not so popular stories. But how it made a difference when an individual started putting himself or herself in the shoes of others and drove a solution through empathy. So these were two things which actually impacted me.
Debjani, you want to speak about
I'm actually close to being quite emotional by this time, and especially because of what Sahil spoke about. I think it just touched a nerve somewhere. And Harini, thank you for bringing to limelight, people who keep on doing good things but don't necessarily grab the light of social media so much. My thing would be more personal. I think I just share something very personal because that's got triggered from what both of them shared, both my panelists shared, is that who's the customer and who do you extend empathy to? Does it always have to be that when you think of design thinking, it has to be all the jargons and to be exercised only in the corporate world? Or is it something that can be so close home as in a family, as between members of the fraternity in the social space, or even within your family? I think I'd like to speak of something which is very, very personal to me. I qualified for CAT, for my FMS after marriage and after childbirth, something which is not known to too many people. And when I say childbirth, you'll be surprised to know that my daughter was 17 days old when the first semester exams struck me. And I was at a loss. I was breastfeeding her. She was a little underweight, not keeping too well. She was 17 days old. And it was a foregone conclusion in the family and amongst even my parents and all that, you have to give up the exams. I mean, you can't really just go through with it because things are not too good here. And the person who stepped in and made me the user, the customer in between, and felt my pangs of anxiety and extended that hand of empathy was my mother-in-law. She said, I will go with you. I'm going to go all the way to Delhi University and meet up with your dean. Let's find out a solution by speaking to him. Is there any other way that we can get this done or get the things amicably sorted out, without wanting to drop the exams? So, she met with the dean on my behalf. And I'm not talking about a very erudite English speaking lady here. Somebody who was, in those days, past class 12th pass out. Somebody, a very, very common sense ridden and extremely erudite lady. She walks into the dean of FMS and says, this is my daughter-in-law, my youngest daughter-in-law. She's your student, and I don't want her to miss her exams. She's a brilliant student. Would you consider giving her a break? Because the paper is of 3 hours. Would you consider giving her a break at the end of 1.5 hours so that she can come back to the car, feed her child, and go back and finish the rest of the paper? And that's how I got the permission from the dean and the university to complete my 3 papers. And when I recall this back, and when I've been, this has been mulling in my mind since all these anecdotes I've been hearing about, I feel that, we make so little of some of the things which have created such a huge impact in our lives itself. And that's the goodness that has given us the energy to take things forward. And that probably makes us as good a person in the personal space as well as a professional, because we are able to think all of this. And the emoting of what Sahil said, the kind of emotion that was there, it only comes from genuineness. It doesn't come from just reading up jargons and a few books in a classroom study. So I'm sure each one of us, irrespective of what anecdotes we may have gone through or what we would have shared, there has always been a space of looking at solutions in different ways. And if you want to call that design thinking so long back, I'm good with it. We continue to do that, and we should continue to do that, because it touches lives, like, Sahil and Harini says, in multiple different ways to make the world a better place to live in. Thank you.
Dave, to Devjani, I'm just going to take a moment just to reflect on your story. And, it's so true that in today, when you talk about action orientation, doing things, for you to actually go through your entire education after childbirth, and, it just shows that if you have an aspiration, doors just open, help comes in, but you need to start somewhere and need to, persevere with what you've started doing. So thank you for sharing that story. And I'm glad, today's forum gave us this opportunity for you to share that story. And, also to the story which Harini shared. I can't see her on my screen again. There she's back. Of that young girl supplying milk. I think, and yes, Sahil, the Cadbury story, I think it just took away all the ads in the festivities. It just turned your focus on saying, look at this ad, right? It's so human, because there was a controversy over another ad just, I think, a couple of days before that. And then this ad came and just took our hands and held us into the festive season, saying, go shop, the world needs you, right? Technically, Indians generally want to save money, but this totally said, go out. Oh, Sahil, you have a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise a point that came to my mind. I think so. For a minute, I was slightly taken aback when Devjani was sharing her story, because it takes a lot of courage to really share something like that. And Devjani, thank you so much for sharing something so personal, something so close to your heart. And I sat back and I started reflecting, Jonathan, to say, how many of us can actually be Devjani's mother-in-law? And when I said that, I was thinking to myself to say, we all are HR professionals. We are custodians of culture, of all these big words, right? Policies, culture, so on and so forth. But when employees really come up to us for help, do we really, and you mentioned this earlier on, Jonathan, in the beginning of the program, to say, do we really quote policy and say, sorry, this is not possible? Or do we really say, hold on, it's my job to stick my neck out, even though it's not part of policy. I will speak to whoever needs to be spoken to, and this deserves an exception. Even if it means not being popular, even if it means putting your neck on the block, even if it means going that extra mile for someone who really matters. And the question is, how many of us really do that? And if we don't, I'm sure a lot of people will have challenges because of which they don't, or they don't know how to navigate. Maybe I thought, Jonathan, if time permits and if your schedule permits, maybe you spend a couple of minutes to contextualize the mother-in-law example to our daily lives to say, maybe Devjani didn't think that she could actually go and speak to the dean.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it didn't come to her, but it came to her mother-in-law to say, listen, my daughter-in-law is going through this. For me, it is not about this or that.
Yeah.
For me, it is about this and that.
Yes.
And in the process of the and, she had the courage to walk up to the dean and offer a possible solution. So I'm saying if we, because otherwise it's going to sound like a wonderful example. I'll keep hearing it. It'll keep resonating in my mind. I'll walk off from the session saying, Devjani, I loved your example. But how do we take that example to each one of us, to each of our organizations, in each of our circumstances and our limitations, to overcome those, to make the world a better place? So I'm not sure if we have time, or Jonathan, you want to weave it into some of your questions that you're brilliantly asking all of us. But extempore, I leave it back to you, Jonathan.
So I'll be honest, I don't think we have time to take that particular one, because I think that goes more on the emotional side and the emotional intelligence which comes out of people. I think I'm trying to stick to design thinking for now. But my next question was anyways going to be, how important is context in design thinking? Because one of the questions you said is either the organization is not ready, or the person who's leading the charge is not ready. And that's where the context comes in. Everything makes sense when you look at a context. So how important is context in design thinking? And I'm opening it up to who wants to go first, fastest fingers first. But Arni, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So again, I have examples to share around contextualization as well. I've been applying a lot of design thinking practices. It's quite naturally. I don't do it consciously because that's the way I work. So one of the organizations that I was associated with had this very unique situation of where we had people from different education levels, and we had a bunch of blue-collar workers as well. And the way we were interacting is it was actually a multinational. So we had to what came to us as a question was, people are not presentable in front of our clients, and you need to do something to enforce the dress code policy. So obviously, a dress code policy, when I looked at what the organization had in place, was obviously a copy paste from somewhere else. So that's where the problem was. It was not contextualized to that organization. So if I would just go and enforce it, it would obviously not work. And if it had to work, it would have worked, because I'm not a magician. Anybody before me would have enforced it. And the fact that it failed simply meant that it was not contextualized. So when I actually went into trying to find out where the problem was, I discovered that it was because people never understood what this dress code policies really meant. So when I actually went thread back to talk about the policy, what really came out is, how do you define what is formal attire for women? Okay, for men it was very easy: shirts, trousers, Monday to Thursday, Friday business casual, Saturday if you're working, t-shirt, blah, blah. How do you define formal attire for women? So the way that policy was written is, it spoke about saris, salwar suits, and Western formal suits as formal. The women, shop floor women employees who actually came and told me, they said, मैडम ये हमको समझ में नहीं आता, आप साड़ी को फॉर्मल कैसे बोल सकते हो? आपकी तरह पहना तो ठीक है, फॉर्मल है, शिल्पा शेट्टी की तरह पहना तो, right? So what happened is that policy became absolutely meaningless in a moment. Okay, no offense meant to Shilpa Shetty. That was just a persona I was talking about. If there are any Shilpa Shetty fans, don't kill me for it. But what it meant is, you pick up a policy, you put it in your organization, just by changing the logos and the name of the organization, it just won't work. Contextualizing is absolutely important, because the ultimate consumers or users of a policy are the ones who really need to imbibe what the intent is, right? So just putting words there which they cannot resonate with doesn't make sense. The intent is important. So whether it comes to anything that has got to do with compliance, or whether it's got to do with any other policy that we very fondly make, it's all about conveying the intent correctly. So I converted that policy to a one-line policy, which said, each one of us is an ambassador of this organization's professional reputation. So when it comes to meeting a customer, we will represent ourselves in a best professional possible manner. I left it to everyone to define in their own minds, what is the organization that you represent? And the result was phenomenal. We just had a one-line policy. Dress code policy was actually scrapped. We said a one-line policy is good enough. So contextualization is important because that's where you're able to convey the intent accurately for the organization.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Sahil, Debjani, you want to add any value on this, or should I go to my next question, which is linked to Debjani's surname? You know? So one of the questions I got is, and I know Sahil will jump on this question, is that how do you compute ROI for doing design thinking in HR?
Okay, so since you shot the bullet, let me bite it. I think we need to fundamentally differentiate between ROI and EVA. Many of us keep focusing on return on investment ROI. But when I was studying economics way back, the one concept that really fascinated me was EVA, economic value add. And I think economic value add is a lot more powerful than ROI. Of course, very difficult to calculate, but very, very tangible in terms of takeaways. Now, if you look at the whole EVA concept of design thinking, I think today, if you pick up Harini's example of saying dress code policy, where has the focus shifted? The focus has shifted from policing a policy to empowering an individual by transferring responsibility. I'll repeat myself. The focus has shifted from policing a policy to empowering individuals or employees by shifting the responsibility. And I think that is where the power lies. In the whole concept of design thinking, if you really go back to even new age retailers, what are they doing? They're putting the power in your hands. They're saying, go out there, pick what you want, do it all on the app, it gets delivered. You want to get to a store, you want to experience it because Indian people typically would want to see, would want to get that feel. Come to the store, do all of that, check your stuff, or check out, no contact, automatically everything goes from your credit card, goes from your Paytm, goes from Amazon Pay, wherever. So I think the whole concept of making the entire supply chain, if I may use that word, in a process, in a design, in a product, or in an experience, extremely efficient, Six Sigma supply chain. And Six Sigma supply chain where the amount of time or effort spent on going through the process is significantly minimized and the experience quotient is significantly increased. The moment you do that, you've actually transferred the amount of effort and energy from spending time on the process to enjoying the outcome. And that's what people love.
Debjani, this ROI is very close to you. It's actually it's reflecting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to actually take it a little beyond just the EVA that Sahil spoke about. I'll take it to the EVP, which is the employee value proposition. I don't even want to put metrics to it. It just comes from the heart. Because today, when you look at the employee base, we're not talking about employee engagement. We are not talking about employee satisfaction. The buzzword is experience. Everywhere the talk is what's going to be today's experience and how is it going to be different to tomorrow's, and how do we keep innovating upon that each day, every step as we go along. Now, in order to be able to do that, as we had already pointed out at the start of the discussion, the organization itself has to be responsive. We can't get anywhere unless the organization itself shows some amount of agility to be able to continuously innovate and accept innovation in its course of work. And the fraternity, which is not just HR, but also probably the line managers and all other functional managers, have to come together to make sure that the environment supports that agility by having different solutions, different kinds of connotations every time as we go along. I think ROI or EVA, as very rightly said by Sahil, is the top metric today in any organization. One doesn't have to talk about that. But then, as long as it touches the heart, as long as I as an employee can empathize, or I can feel that somewhere it is touching me in some positive way and is making me want to come back to the workplace tomorrow, even after going back home tonight, is what is going to make that ROI and EVA that much more worthwhile. So I would always say ROI, EVA, great. We need to work on that, but couple it up with the very, very personal experiences that every employee has to go through. Because if we take our eyes off it, we might just lose out on something which is soft, which is very nuanced, but which would actually add to the EVA and the ROI in multiple ways.
I think brilliant point made there, Johnny. You really touched the core of what I wanted to talk about. For example, just take this simple example, Jonathan, right? We always said banking, very regulated industry, so on and so forth. It just took one bank to say, give me your Aadhaar card number and give me your fingerprint. I will open your account in flat 3 minutes. Where did the whole gyan of saying, no, you need to fill a form, or you need a nominee, or you need to sign here, sign there, where did all that go? It just vanished. As HR professionals pre-COVID, what's the biggest pain for a new joiner? Everyone can answer on the chat. What is the biggest pain on day one for a new joiner? It's very simple. It's information overload with all your gyan sessions, getting to know the culture of the company. It is information overload with policies, processes. It's a lot of form filling, be it mandatory stuff, statute, which is to do with your PF or your gratuity, and 100 other forms which go into an employee file, which when you need them, most of the times you never find them, right? Because you don't know where the file is. But with a lot of stuff being digitalized now, why can't you just make that entire onboarding process, keeping the user in mind, a 5-minute process? And a lot of organizations have started doing it, where they gamify the entire onboarding even before the person joins. So you already know who you're going to work with, who's your buddy, which organization, which place, who's going to connect you where, all of that, right? Something design thinking really helps in multiple ways when you put the user in the center and get that experience quotient like Devjani spoke about at an all-time high.
And talking about experience, so I just want to add one more small example here. Talking about experience, when we think of drafting a policy, typically all of us HR folks think of a document, a Word document. Okay, but if you actually get into the user's mind, how difficult and laborious it is to read a document which is worded which is almost like a legal document. It's extremely difficult. So when it's difficult, you're actually put off. You don't feel like reading it. So I'm very sure that most people who read through those manuals when they join an organization really go through the last page and probably just sign on the dotted line saying, I have read and understood. But how many of us really read it and how many of us understand? We all know it. Now, I know of an organization where we tried this small experiment and it worked beautifully. We converted all policies to a comic book and we called it Concept Through Conversations. Concept Through Conversations. So all policies were in the form of a comic book, absolutely easily readable. And we just left it with them saying, pick it up at any time and read any page that you want. And what is there in the comic strip is an HR persona which goes around answering questions. There are aisle conversations, there are coffee machine conversations, all of them depicted like a comic strip. It's like a comic book. All that you have to do and you can do and you cannot do, it's all there in the form of a story, and it's absolutely readable. So the experience a user gets reading a heavily worded document vis-a-vis a comic book is very different. And that's an example of how design thinking can be put into practice. So one is, while you're doing gamification, you can also do things like this, where you bring in, basically simplify the complex so that it reaches the user in a better manner.
Sorry, Jonathan, another 30 seconds. Just wanted to add a very relevant point. Think of it this way, right? You started off, the question was on metrics. Let's really come to the point. What's the point here? A legally worded policy. An employee knows there's a manual or an employee manual, go there, read it. But more often than not, each of our team members are inundated with very, very basic questions on policies. Why? Because it's very easy to pick up the phone and ask your HR friend rather than read 20 pages of a document and still not get a black or white answer. Because not all policies can be absolutely black and white, right? And if that is your metric, what does your HR guy typically do? He'll answer once, he'll answer twice. Third time, he'll say, you know what, go read the policy. Now, if you send the employee back to the policy, he's going to say, why do I have HR then? I might as well refer to the policy. So do you see how this metric, which is shifting goalpost every minute, only because design thinking or the principles of empathy have not been applied to the document? But the moment you do something like that, you end up creating a pull, which is much better than a push. 30 seconds from my side.
So, in fact, that just gets me an example is, one of the biggest issues why HR is busy, from my observation in organizations, is because policy dissemination and interpretation differs, because there's churn, I may be in a different mood when I'm answering to somebody and things like that. And, that's where design thinking comes in, very handy, because if you remove the middleman, which is the HR business partner, from interpretation, and like you said, Sahil, where an employee experiences information real time. I mean, that's a different feeling in itself. And just to add to this, because, I haven't spoken, I set up an organization for Wellspan. We set up the entire team during the pandemic. So none of these guys, we met physically. And I'm talking about CXO team. So you're hiring a CXO team. So, and that's where the organization was ready, because my MD was ready, saying that we don't wait to meet people. We'll interview them thrice on video. We hire them. So the next step was, okay, you've hired them. How do you onboard them? Okay, we'll send the computer home. We'll get everything done at their home. And so generally what happens is an induction, you get to see the expanse of the organization, right? As a conglomerate, it's a huge expanse. There's lots to see and know about the organization. Here there was a reverse, where people first got to know each other because they were onboarded in April, May, June at the peak of the pandemic and did not know a lot of the group. And then they went into the induction for the group. So the experience was, from a wow to a next wow, right? And I think, like Devjan, you and Harini pointed out really well, it's for both, the HR person as well as the leader in the organization to say that let's go with this, because there's no other option because you can't meet physically, right? And then you talk about background verification and all that. That became part 2, not part 1 of the whole game, right? So I have actually lived that experience, and I so agree with you, because it actually can happen if you're ready to put your neck out and say, let's do it this way. And honestly, the team speaks a lot about camaraderie there. So I'm almost done. Last question to all of you, keeping in mind time, and if Peter allows us more time, we'll pick up some more questions. But last question, if you had to kill a design thinking project, what is one thing you would advise everybody to do?
If Johnny had the first laugh, she's going to have the last laugh as well.
Well, if I had to kill a design thinking process and a project, I just have to be the busybody, and tell everybody around me that why reinvent the wheel, just tweak it and apply it. It's been done before. It's been done to death. Don't exercise your mind, as it is the mind has to do many other beautiful things. I'm wondering what in the era of pandemic. But even then, we are so sloths, and we get into such such zones of inertia, and my blood boils. So I'm coming across with a little bit of a heated passion here when I talk of that fraternity. They just don't want to extend their mind. They just don't want to think ahead. It's almost like, God, we've done so much in 30 years. Now's the time for retirement, but I still want the pay at the end of the month. So I'm sorry to say that, that's what can kill a design process. Forget a design process. It can kill anybody, any little Josh that anybody has around the corner. So, that's my bit on this.
I got the best out of you, Devjani, for sure. Harini, Sahil, who wants to go next?
Yeah. So it's very, very, very easy to kill design thinking. It's very extremely difficult to build. It is very easy to kill. Very simple. In one line, I would say, "Jo chal raha hai, chalne do." And in L&T, we used to have this very common statement: "You come to office, 2 punch, 1 lunch." Ho gaya design thinking ka depth. That's it.
Wonderful, yeah, very nice. I think so. Just say very nice to everything, and design thinking is done. तुम भी खुश, मैं भी खुश, सब खुश. मेहनत क्यों करना है, right? You're also good, Jonathan. Devjani, you were a great speaker. Harini, your ideas are fantastic. Peterson, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here. You just be nice to everyone.
एम्प्लॉय एक्सपीरियंस ठीक नहीं है तो क्या फर्क पड़ता है, एट्रिशन हुआ तो होने दो, हायरिंग टीम का काम क्या है अदरवाइज, राइट?
नहीं, और क्वेश्चन मत करो प्लीज, क्वेश्चन मत करो, डोंट क्वेश्चन, लेट स्टेटस quo अप्लाई.
यस.
और क्वेश्चन करके भी मिला क्या आपको देवजानी इतने सालों में? क्या मिला आपको क्वेश्चन करके?
और आप बुरे बने बहुत लोगों के साथ.
सोचो फिर इससे अच्छा तो पॉपुलर बन जाते हैं.
Jonathan, you can gauge where all this is coming from, right?
Absolutely.
Jonathan is so tempted to add his 2 cents, but he's holding back.
So I'll tell you, I can so relate. I don't know if you guys have seen that bingo mad angles, a triangle. Look at metrics. And keep switching the metrics and you say, ये metric सही है, but it's actually equivalent. Whichever you look at it, nothing's going to change, right? Sahil, you have not given your silver bullet of how to kill a design thinking process. You said सब अच्छा है.
सब अच्छा ही है. Everything is good, very good.
Just a small example. I was part of this huge conglomerate called Bharti, not Bharti of today. Okay, this was a Bharti of 96 to 2004 when they actually became the telecom kings from EPBT manufacturing telephone set Beatel wala. So, I had a defining stint of 9 years at that point of time with this conglomerate. So I saw them when they were only manufacturing those Beatel telephone sets, and the only design thinking was applying different colors. From there, it went to, all kinds of novelties, including design thinking and how to acquire another circle in another state. So there was a lot of strategy even applied there, and it looked like a different thing. But what happened in that company, a reason why I ultimately had to leave it, is that, they won the Golden Peacock Award for Best Training. They won the Golden Peacock Award for Best Employer. They won the Hewlett. I mean, anybody and everybody. And sometimes you wonder whether these awards are actually, fair and square. Because you're an insider, you know what's really happening. So at the end of the day, fine, what happened is everybody turned around, especially the CEOs, and said, why the hell are you ramming your head like a bull in a china shop? We are all there. We've already achieved it. Why, reinvent the wheel? It's all there. We're the best practices in the industry. And that's the time I said to myself, okay, 9 years, good. I've breathed, slept, done everything telecom. Time to move on. It was a conscious decision, because the day you decide to stay in an environment where your creativity is told that there is no place for it, I think you either sign a death warrant by continuing, or you say to yourself that, boss, time to move on. And that's definitely a message for everybody around. Whether you learn design thinking or not, don't allow yourself and your ability to create that beauty that you can, because each one of us have pillars of beauty sitting within us. Don't allow that to be killed by anybody else telling you that there's enough around the corner. That's definitely not done.
And Jonathan, while I did say it earlier, since you insisted for one more, I think taking a leaf from Devjani, don't kill it around. Don't think that you're the best, but more importantly, don't even fight for the credit. I think many times we say it's my idea. It's never your idea. It's the user's idea.
Yeah.
Because the moment you work the idea for the user, your entire design will be successful. But if you keep fighting, thinking it's my idea, I want the credit, I think you've lost the game, because an idea will never work unless you don't work the idea.
Yeah.
And to work the idea, you need to think like a user, be like a user, and give the importance to the user and not to yourself.
Sure. Peterson, do we have time, or should we say?
Yeah, so before we take in further questions, we'd like to have a quick feedback on the session. We'll just run a poll right now. And while we are doing so, we can also have our participants share questions in the chat box, which we can take them after the poll.
बोर्ड एग्जाम का रिजल्ट जैसा तो नहीं होगा?
I think 1 hour short for all four of us, for sure. But I think it was a good conversation, a lot of emotions, and direct dil se. But the one question I liked, which I don't think design thinking is a savior, but one of the questions which I like, which I didn't ask, is, and it's a lot of tongue in cheek, how will design thinking enable HR professionals to perform better?
Yeah, of course. Why not? Why not?
So what's your CXO team asking today? Your CXO team is asking, can you give me ways to create a more agile organization? Can you give me better employee insights to be able to allow us to create better employee decisions? Can you share experiences or any practices that you are aware of that will help us push the current ways of looking at people dynamics in better ways? I think when questions are differing, questions have changed from what they used to be earlier, then obviously the responses and the answers have also to evolve. And those answers can only come out of creative thinking, people-centric orientation towards all the issues that you have on hand. And the only way to look at it is if you have that people centricity, it'll tell you exactly as both Sahil and Harini said, put the user in the middle, the user itself will answer the question. And automatically the HR responses also evolve alongside.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about agile organizations, I'm speaking from the principles of agile. It was a myth, and it still continues to remain a myth, and that's something that I'm strongly advocating. Agile, though it came up in the software industry, a lot of HR professionals at that time when agile actually became popular, a lot of us assumed that we have got nothing to do with it. And that's where it's failing. Why agile became a set of tools and not a methodology of working is only because HR folks decided to stay away from it. We sat within our comfort zones and we said that agile has got nothing to do with us. But if you simply read the 4 tenets of agile, don't even go to the 12 principles, but read the 4 tenets of agile. It's simply what HR professionals should do as an approach towards creating agile organizations. So just imagine if we were to apply design thinking, and they're all very related, okay? Design thinking and agile are very, very related. It's a lot of superimpositions on them. So if we were to drive our organizations applying the agile tenets, applying design thinking as a practice, as a way of thinking, I think we would be able to drive organizations better. So I think that's a good question. And if you're talking about improving HR efficiency by design thinking, there are no two ways to.
Ditto.
Before I close, Sahil, do you want to comment on that, or are we done?
No, I think we were good. Just one point. So Devjani spoke about the whole CXO asking questions. Harini spoke about agile. I think pre-COVID, it was all about how do you get your leadership team to collaborate. Yeah. I think the fundamental question that we need to answer today is efforts are being put in. Where are the results? And if you keep trust as the center of the fulcrum, the basic design thinking principles to be applied to say, how do you create trust? And if the user is feeling a sense of mistrust, how do you deal with that emotion? You very clearly strayed away from the topic of emotional intelligence, saying it's a different topic altogether because it's so vast. But I think it's very, very closely interrelated to the whole concept of design. Because the moment you trust a design, you end up buying the design because you buy emotionally and then justify rationally. And a lot of the whole buying process, be it buying humans as talent on board on a team, be it buying products or services, ultimately trust takes center stage. But obviously for another day.
And that's a 360-degree for you, Jonathan.
Tushar has a question, and the three of us strongly believe that every question deserves an answer. So I think if Tushar is still there, we should take that up.
Is this the one? How do we capitalize design thinking process to build an all-weather
competent workforce?
So I'll repeat it. How do we capitalize design thinking process in building an all-weather competent workforce?
I didn't quite understand the question. So Tushar is there, maybe he should elaborate, or if any of the other two panelists have understood, you can take it.
Tushar, would you want to elaborate on it?
Yeah, hello, Jonathan. Hi, this is Tushar here.
Yes, Tushar.
Yeah, so you guys, I'm audible, right?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so the question is about, we are talking about design thinking, and this is quite impressive, and they're good thing. where we are working on some. What I want to understand is, being an L&D professional, I want to capitalize design thinking process to ensure that we have all weather competent workforce in the organization. So it's all about creating a strategy around working a competent workforce, and how design thinking can help me in doing this. So it's about this. So
Okay,
because
so
what happens
one of
is,
the things, can I have a go for a minute?
yeah, sure, please.
Okay, so Tushar, one of the things which I can, from what you just now stated, I can pick up because you spoke about L&D. You see, one of the big things that you can do from an L&D perspective is basically get the messaging right and the messaging up there. So if you're talking about creating a DNA around design thinking, meaning that you want to bring about design thinking into the ways of work at the workplace, so that it is echoed in practically every aspect of work. I think you can do what probably the quality mission started at one point of time, or the Posh started at one point of time, when they wanted to bring in education and awareness and orientation, and it just had to be done from an L&D perspective. I think pick up that message, break down design thinking into what Jonathan's first question was to us, which is in layman terms. Just break down design thinking into layman terms and bring about lovely posters, lovely messages, some good quotes. Make sure that you have them put up at all vantage points. Create storylines, create storybooks. Also have stories telling sessions. You see, each one of us, as you saw, through the course of the discourse, picked up anecdotes and stories of our own. It's a very powerful medium. You should also do the same when you address your employees in different gatherings, because it hooks their interests immediately. So whenever you're wanting to usher in orientation around a certain topic, which you want to create, as a standard across the organization, the messaging has to be very clear, and messaging can be done by these various different ways as part of the L&D repertoire. That's what I would have to say to this.
Thank you, Debjani. It really helps.
So thank you for the session. And I mean, I'm done, but if we have some more questions and if you guys are available, we can continue for another 5 or 7 minutes, and someone from the audience can, probably ask any questions which I may have missed or not covered. I think it was a great learning session and good fun spending time with all three of you, and sorry, Peterson, all four of you now, because you're there on camera now. But it was good fun. And I think some of the stories, anecdotes which you have shared, which are very personal, I think I'm sure, like I said, Debjani definitely would have inspired a lot of people by sharing what you went through. I mean, it takes a lot of courage, and it also, a lot of us get inspired by these personal stories. Good inputs from all of you, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to host you. It was good fun. So I repeated fun thrice.
You played the perfect host, Jonathan.
Yeah.
You didn't put any of us in trouble.
Yes.
No, I was going to say, when Jonathan said that, I'm done, I was going to say, oh, we are also undone by, you and your way of moderating the sessions. We're completely undone.
Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant questions by Jonathan.
We've never
Thank
tried
you
an
so much.
unplugged session, so thank you for adjusting and accepting.
No, it is fantastic. Thank you very much.
I think you used the word 3 times, and that was exactly what we wanted it to be. Hopefully, the remaining audience also had as much of fun like we had. But Jonathan, wonderful. Thank you so much for being a great moderator.
I also want to thank, apart from HRAI, because it takes a lot to create such a podium, I want to thank Sahil and Harini, because you need a certain ambience, you need a certain platform to be able to even share personal stories, feel that comfortable, that it's a safe haven. And these are two good friends of mine, irrespective of, even if we don't talk to each other for months and years and then, we're still good friends whenever we pick up the phone next. So thank you very much, both of you, I think, for creating that safe haven for me. Thank you.
We can send you virtual hugs.
Yeah. I also want to thank the 60 odd people who are still on the call. I think it'd be very unfair on our part if we keep just thanking each other without thanking them.
Yes.
We would be nothing without you. We would just be 4 friends talking to each other. But you guys made it very, very interesting with your questions, with your comments on the chat. Thank you for taking time out and joining in, everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and that was great Josh on the comments. The comments actually never stopped coming, which is also a very unique thing that I found in this platform. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thoroughly enjoyed pulling Bhushan's leg.
Okay. So thank you all, thanks to all of you all, especially Jonathan, for bringing up such brilliant questions. And thank you, dear panel members, Ms. Devjani, Ms. Harini, and Mr. Sahil, for your exquisite examples and stories, bringing out the essence of design thinking. Such a brilliant session. I'm sure all our participants have had a great session. To all those who wish to share and learn, you can also access the slides and recordings of our today's session on our YouTube shared in the chat window. Before we conclude with today's session, we would also want to thank all the association, Geisha, NASCOM COE, and LinkedIn Local India for supporting HRAI and its event. To know more about these associations, request you to kindly visit the link provided in the chat windows. Do join us for our next Connecting the Dots series on the topic Human Resource, the Art of Servant Leadership on the 19th of November 2020 at 3 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Request you all to kindly register for this event at the link mentioned in the chat window. See you soon. Stay safe. Take care and bye for now.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. See you, everyone.
See you. Thank you, Shyam. We may now end this session.